welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Friday, November 1st. It is a Victory Friday as we are coming off a New York Jets win to snap their ugly 5-game losing streak as they pick up their second Thursday night win of the season last night against the Houston Texans, once again by a final score of 21-13 to get to 3-6 on the season and keep a glimmer of hope alive for the rest of the season for this New York Jets team, hoping they can build off of last night's second half performance. Today, we're going to be breaking down all angles of last night, giving you some more takeaways, the good, the bad, all that good stuff, as we always do on these day after podcasts. This is episode 418 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast, and I thank you as always for joining me. It's nice to come off of a win. It's nice to do one of these shows talking about a win. It's been a hot minute. The last time we were talking about a New York Jets victory was September 20th, the day after their Thursday night win against the New England Patriots in week 3. And we are finally fast forward November 1st. We are again talking about a Jets win. So it's been way too long. It's been a very long, other than last night, it was a very long month of October. But here we are, pick up a win. Always feels nice to get a W. As always, though, before we begin, let me tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you want to get in on any of the betting action for all of the major sports, check out BetUS. Plus, use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your last 3 deposits, up to $2,000, or on your first 3 deposits, rather, up to $2,000. College football tomorrow, full day. You've got a full day of football Sunday coming up here in 2 days. So you want to get in on any of the action there, or any NBA, any NHL action. Check out BetUS. Use my link, 150 sign-up bonus, first 3 deposits, and up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. You want to get out to any sporting event, football, baseball, or baseball's over, rather, basketball, hockey, any sport, or a play, a concert, a show, you name it. If you can buy a ticket for an event, SeatGeek has it. And if it's your first time using SeatGeek, use promo code BubsOnSports for $20 off your first purchase. And, of course, our friends over at Huga House, they just released a couple new arrivals last week that are going very fast. So if you want any of the hats that they just released, or any of their awesome hats, including the 2 Aaron Rodgers 20th season hats, check them out. And at checkout, use promo code BUBS for 15% off any purchase. So now let's get into today's podcast. Again, episode 418. Appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure to please like and subscribe for those joining us here on YouTube, and appreciate you all tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms here on a Friday, the first day of November. And it's a Victory Friday. And like I said last night, I'll continue to say it. I'm not going to fully buy back in and fully believe that this team's going to make a run and talk playoffs until this team gets back to 500. That's been my baseline. That's kind of where I've stood. Once this team gets back to 500, heck, even if they win the next 2 games and get to 5-6 by the bye week, you know, you can have those kind of fun conversations during the bye week. I'm sure I might be involved in those, but right now there is still a lot more work to do. And it's just 1 win, and this team needs to stack them, and they have 10 days to prepare for an Arizona Cardinals team that's beatable, and they need to prove that they can beat a team with extra days to prepare, because we saw how it happened early in the season when they beat up on New England on Thursday night, looked good, 10 days to prepare for Denver, and came out and laid an egg that started this whole 5-game losing streak where the coach gets fired, you make a trade for Devontae Adams, you change the play call, all that stuff. And here we are in November, finally picking up a win on the last day of October to end this stretch. So happy we got a win, but of course it's still a lot more work to do. But it's always nice to enjoy a win, because losing stinks. I hate coming on here and talking about this team when they're losing. I would have hated to come on here today and talk about future head coaches, future general managers of this team, because we've been talking about that stuff for weeks now. It's finally nice to actually talk about a win and talk about some positives. as opposed to talking about the kicker not getting, they're talking about the kicker messing up games, 3 timeouts in the first quarter, like what happened last week, whatever it is, the defense blowing a game late, Rodgers looking old, whatever it is. It's nice to enjoy a win here on a Friday and get a couple extra days off here as a fan, get to enjoy Sunday and Monday without any stress. And then, of course, you get ready for Arizona next week. We'll kind of break down all angles of this one today. Jeff Ulbrich did speak to the media. No real injury updates from him. I'm sure we'll probably know next week when he speaks to the media after this mini bye is over, but no real injury updates there. Obviously, John Simpson left the game. Jets were a little banged up front on the offensive line, which led to Olu Fashion, to the rookie, getting reps at right tackle for the first time in his career, to the point where they were actually telling him what to do on each play because he didn't know what to do. He never played right guard. It's his first ever time. So considering that happened in the middle of the game, I thought Olu held his own out there and actually looked pretty good, especially watching back the film this morning before I came on here to record. He looked pretty good doing it, but no new injury updates there. So with that being said, we got to dive right into it. I'll start on the defense for this one with some more takeaways from yesterday. Look, we all year long we've talked about the defensive line. It's been underwhelming. It's been a problem. It's been just not. It's had some moments, right? New England was impressive, 7 sacks. There's been some moments where they've been able to get home, get consistent pressure, do some damage, and then recently there's been some moments where they haven't been able to get home. They've struggled against the run. They haven't been able to contain edges. You've gotten very little pass rush dominance from really any of your key guys, other than really Will McDonald. Early in the year was really the only one producing and still is producing. Now Quinnen Williams is starting to break out again. He's looking like his normal self, which we'll get to here in a second. Hassan Reddick had a good game yesterday. So the defensive line here over the last night really kind of had a breakout, and you hope it's the start of something. And you've got to start with the defensive line because of what they were able to do last night. It was super, super impressive. Whether this continues or it doesn't continue, whether it was just the fact that Houston, the Texans up front aren't very good from a pass blocking perspective. We knew that, but you still got to give credit there to the defensive line for taking advantage of a mismatch, taking advantage of a unit that has struggled, and they dominated. When you look and break down the New York Jets defensive line and their pass rush last night, not just the defensive line, a couple other guys as well that got involved, it was super, super, super impressive. Quinnen Williams last night, 8 pressures, 4 quarterback hits, 1.5 sacks. Hassan Reddick last night, welcome to the party. Only 7 weeks late, but he had a good game. 8 pressures, 1 hit, a half a sack. Will McDonald last night didn't get in the sack column, but 7 pressures, 1 hit, or 1 quarterback hit, 1 forced fumble, or 1 fumble recovery. Michael Clemens, 3 quarterback pressures, 1 quarterback hit, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. And then some other guys. Jamie Sherwood, 1 pressure, 1 QB hit, 2 sacks at the linebacker spot. DJ Reed got involved with a sack. And even Solomon Thomas, who was dealing with some injuries last night, got banged up, came back in, also had a sack last night. So as a team, the New York Jets made C.J. Stroud's life miserable, really for the second year in a row. If you look back at last year, C.J. Stroud, one of his worst games of his rookie year was against the New York Jets. And then you fast forward a year later, and last night, one of his worst games again in his career came against the New York Jets. He finished last night 11 of 30 for 191 yards and got sacked 8 times and only completed 36.7% of his passes for 6.4 yards per completion. He was awful last night. And if you look back at last season when he faced the Jets, he was 10 of 23 for 91 yards, completed 43.5% of his passes, and was brought down 4 times via the sack. Last season, no touchdowns, no picks. So in 2 games against the Jets, completion percentage well below 50%, has gotten sacked 12 times, and has yet to throw a touchdown against this defense. So early on here, the defense has actually been an Achilles heel for C.J. Stroud early in his career. They kind of have had his number here so far through his first 2 seasons. But as a team last night, 32 pressures, 11 quarterback hits, and 8 sacks. And that is what this defensive line needs to continue to do if they want to make this not just be one win that we'll look back on as a fluky game where the Texans were missing their top 2 wideouts, Stroud just had an off night, and Aaron Rodgers had a vintage second half. If the Jets want this game to be more than just one win that we'll look back on as a meaningless win, as a typical Jet win where they win a game, some fans get their hopes up, and then they fall apart next week in Arizona. If they do not want that to happen, this defense and that line needs to continue to play like they played last night, especially taking advantage of a unit in Houston that has struggled this season. Now, they did struggle a little bit against the run. Mixon had 106 yards on 4.4 yards per carry and a touchdown. They allowed 187 yards last night on the ground. That remains a problem. A lot of it is the defensive line. They've been getting beat. It feels like on running plays, they just get the physicality's not there. They just get pushed around. They just lose their one-on-one battles. And then when you get to the second level, you've had some problems tackling, whether it be Sauce Gardner, one of the biggest culprits so far of missing tackles and players kind of breaking through his weak arm tackles early in this season. Not really early in the season. 9 games in, he hasn't been any good. He's been one of the more alarming players to have a down year so far is Sauce Gardner, both from a coverage standpoint and a tackling standpoint. So a lot of it does fall on the defensive line. Some of it, of course, as well falls in some of the secondary pieces where they have weak arm tackles that just don't do anything, and physical runners like Joe Mixon are going to run right through them and break tackles and pick up a lot of yards after contact. And that's what's happened this season. So that's still something that needs to be worked on. But you want to know how to eliminate one of the league's better quarterbacks, one of the league's better younger quarterbacks. And coming up here, you got Kyler next week who can do some damage. He's a little bit smaller. He's a guy that you get pressure in his face, you could really make his life miserable. Really, you really can. So that's crucial moving forward. But a great night last night for the defensive line. And I don't know what it is with this team, just Thursday night games in general, like they come alive. I wish every game from here on out could be Thursday night because it's something about this team on a short week. It feels like with less time to think and a quick turnaround, it feels like it's helping this team, which is kind of strange because you would think a team that's on, has got some older pieces, got a quarterback in Aaron Rodgers that's drank the cayenne pepper and water and now feels 100%, but still a quarterback that's been banged up this year. You would think this was a team that would dread and struggle in Thursday night games because of the short, quick turnaround, but it's been the complete opposite. Like they've played their best game of the year came against New England. Last night was their best. Like 30 minutes of football was some of the best 30 minutes of football that the New York Jets have played. So they played a full 60 minutes. Like out of their season so far, they've had 3 wins, right? 180 minutes of football. 150 of them have been really, really good. I mean, Tennessee, I guess you can maybe say 120. You could probably say first half of Tennessee was ugly. The full New England game was really good. And then last night was really good. But like in terms of best football we've seen this team play, it was the New England game, and then it was the second half last night, and then it was probably the second half against Tennessee, if you had to rank them in those 3 wins. So something about the Thursday night games. I also want to talk about Quinnen Williams because he's a guy that Jets fans as well have criticized him. I mean, I think the Muhammad Wilkerson comparisons are a little crazy. Not a little crazy. They are very crazy. He's been there. He got off to a slow start this season, no doubt, but to compare him to Mo Wilkerson has been a little wild. I don't agree with that. But to the people out there that have compared him to Mo Wilkerson, he's kind of shut some of those people up here over the last couple weeks, even in the losses. And we talked about Quinnen last week. Even in the loss to New England, played well. One of his better games of the season. And really, that's been the case. He's been turning it on. 9 games this year. The last 4 have been really good for Quinnen. When you look at his numbers as a whole, his whole body of work, he's got 22 total tackles on the season, 5 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, and 13 quarterback hits. 4 of those rather, coming last night. So that's his full season body of work. Solid, not bad, right? But then you look at, this is what's really impressive for Quinnen Williams, is the last 4 games. 4 of his 5 sacks this season have come in the last 4 games. He's got 21 pressures in the last 4 games, and 3 of his 4 tackles for loss this season have come in the last 4 games. So Quinnen Williams over the last 4 weeks against Buffalo, Pittsburgh, New England, and Houston, specifically really just the last 2 weeks as well, where he's had 3 sacks over the last 2 games, including 8 pressures last night and 4 quarterback hits, like I mentioned. He's been back to his dominant self after what was an underwhelming first 5 games where he only had 1 sack through 5 games. Something, it feels like, clicked in that Buffalo game, and he's been a lot better. And he's been back to his normal self. And he's been back to that dominant interior pass rusher where one-on-one he just dominates his rep. And we saw a lot of that last night. And that was a really positive sign. Hopefully moving forward, if this team wants to make a run, Quinnen continues to be that dominant pass rusher that we paid him to be. This isn't a surprise for Quinnen Williams. This is what Quinnen Williams is supposed to do for whatever reason. Similar to the team, he just struggled the first 5 games, although the Jets were 2-3. But you get the point. Over the last 4, been much better, especially the last 2. Last week against New England and this week against Houston. And look, you want to say, oh, well, they're not very good offensive lines. Fine. That's what really good players are supposed to take advantage of mismatches then. Like, no excuse then. He's supposed to be dominating in these games. So it's still good to see. It's still a positive, even if you want to bring up the point of, oh, it's the Patriots. Their offense line's not any good. In Houston, their pass protection's been a problem all year. They went into this game tied for the 3rd most sacks allowed in football. Now they've allowed the most sacks in football. But still, the point is, great players, a guy that's getting the amount of money that Quinnen Williams is making, he's supposed to be a game wrecker, especially when he's facing an inferior offensive lineman. And that's what he did last night. So credit to him. He's been good. Been much better recently. I also want to throw these 2 up here because last night these 2 guys were pretty large in the victory. Will McDonald, Hassan Reddick off the edges. So we'll start it with Will McDonald because he's been good all year. Reddick, it's only been 2 weeks. So kind of want to give more. And again, Hassan Reddick, he's still got to do a lot more for me to fully jump on the Reddick train. Like, the whole holdout is still annoying. It still leaves a bad taste in your mouth as a Jet fan. I'm not going to go down that whole road. Again, I'm trying to infuse a little bit of positivity here on today's show because we've been so negative for the last month that I think it's healthy to be a little bit more positive. It's not very healthy just to live in a world where you're always negative all the time. So trying to infuse a little bit of positive. So we'll take a look at Will McDonald here. This was his chart last night, pass rushing chart last night. Look at all that green. I mean, this is just crazy. So last night he had 33 pass rushes, 9 pressures, and a 27.3% pressure rate, which is just absolutely crazy. Now, he didn't have a sack, and his get off was 0.86. So I know you're going to look and say, obviously the sack wasn't there, but the pressure and the pressure rate, the pressure percentage is extremely impressive. And you can make the case that there was a couple plays last night. It looked like he was maybe getting held. They didn't call it. And to add on to this chart, according to Next Gen Stats, Will McDonald generated a season high 9 pressures on 33 pass rush snaps. We talked about that, with 6 coming on 15 matchups against left tackle Laramie Tunsil. McDonald has now generated at least 20% plus pressure rate in 6 games this season, the most such games in the NFL. So all year he's been very good. And with Reddick starting to come into the fold, Quinnen Williams starting to look like his normal self, things really open up for Reddick because attention now for offensive lines ideally have to shift to all 3 of those guys as opposed to early in the year where it was just Will McDonald. And that was all. Now, hopefully Reddick can continue to start to ramp up and play better. Quinnen hopefully can continue on this trend, and Will McDonald as well. And I'll be honest, I was wrong about the Will McDonald pick. I think a lot of Jets fans were. I think we all wanted Bradarick Jones. Obviously, Steelers jump up, trade with the Patriots. We all know that. Don't have to rehash that on April of 2023 first round draft night. We all know what happened. But he's a guy that has turned into a very, very good pass rusher. And you can make the case, where would the heck would this team, where the heck, this pass rush, we can already say this year, outside of last night against New England, for the most part, at times this season has been non-existent. And even when this pass rush has had games where you walk away, where they just do nothing, Will McDonald feels like every game this year has made a play that makes you go, man, this guy's really, really good. Really good. So you could say without Will McDonald, this defensive line would just be nobody. It would be nothing would be happening. They wouldn't even get in sacks. But last night they, of course, broke out. I also want to show you the Hassan Reddick pass rush chart here. Very impressive night. Very solid night for him. Look, you know what you're going to get on this podcast. Reddick, we all criticized, and I still do. Don't understand the whole holdout. Either way, it's over. And he played well, and you got to praise him for it. He played well last night. You got to give him credit where credit's due. 32 pass rushes, 8 pressures. That's a 25% pressure percentage, had a half a sack. And you add some on to that. This is according to Next Gen Stats. 6 of those 21 matchups, 6 of 21 matchups came against Titus Howard, the Texans' right tackle. Reddick's 8 pressures are the second most by a Jets pass rusher in a game this season. So really good night for him as well. And again, all I'm saying is, if this win wants to create a start, if this win ultimately needs to lead, if this win will ultimately lead to more success and maybe a run, you're going to need these guys to continue to step up. And that's why I started with the defensive line today, because this is a team that relies so heavily on their pass rush. And really, for other than small moments here and there, there's been none of it other than flashes. Last night was the first time where every play, even better than New England, where every single play, Stroud had a rollout or taken a sack or thrown away or affected his throw. It gives you some hope that maybe this pass rush can be turning a little bit of a corner here. And now they've got 10 days to prepare for their next opponent in Kyler Murray, where, again, you get in his face, smaller quarterback, you can do some damage there. Now, I want to shift on over to the offensive side of the football now. We've got to talk about Garrett Wilson and last night. I mean, that was just crazy, crazy play. Still can't believe that he made that catch. Just wild. The reaction today to the catch has kind of been a little mixed. Some people feel it's the best. Some people still feel OBJ's the best. Some people, whatever. Everybody has a different opinion. I'll say this from a Jet fan perspective, it's the greatest catch I've ever seen. From an NFL perspective, it's right up there with OBJ. And I don't think you can't deny that. That was simply amazing. And it also was a touchdown, which makes it even crazier that he was found a way to have the awareness to at least just try and get his foot down, got his shin down by an inch. That in itself was crazy. And what people are forgetting too is he made a catch earlier in the game, one-handed, which was crazy, where he scored. So he had 2 very, very, the one obviously was insane. The other one was still a very impressive catch though, where he, caught it and I think probably ran it in for 5-10 yards afterwards. Yards after the catch there, but just unbelievable. And Garrett Wilson this season, I've talked about it from a statistical standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, his numbers are still there. And statistically, he's right up there near the top of the league. Early in the season, there was some communication issues with him and Rodgers. There was certainly some bumps in the road there. And you, of course, had the ball that popped off his chest against Pittsburgh. And that's, of course, a massive play. And you can't underestimate that he's got to make that catch, no doubt about it. But outside of that play, Garrett Wilson's been pretty much as good as advertised for this Jets team. He's been about as good as you could have expected, especially now with Devontae Adams here, which has opened things up for Garrett Wilson. 94 targets as a whole this year. This is what Garrett Wilson's number looked like. 94 targets, 60 receptions, 663 yards, 5 touchdowns, 11.1 yards per reception. Now, I know it's a Thursday night game, so he's got one more game than everybody else, so these are a little skewed. But first in receptions, second in yards, tied for fourth in touchdowns. And his 94 targets also lead the NFL, and by a pretty wide margin. Bearing Malik Neighbors on Sunday getting 21 targets from Daniel Jones and company, the Garrett Wilson will walk out of week 9 leading the NFL in targets by a wide margin. The next closest is Malik Neighbors with 73 targets. So Garrett Wilson's gotten targeted a lot. He's taken advantage of those targets. And in 3 of his last 5 games, he's had 100 yards. And you look at his last 5 games as a whole, very, very impressive. Like I said, the first 4 games of the season, there was a lot of bumps. Some miscommunications. The numbers weren't quite there. You know, the first 4 games only had 1 touchdown. There was some drops there. There was some problems there with him and Rodgers. And then it feels like the Minnesota game where they made it a point to just force feed him the ball, 23 targets that game. It feels like since that game, something's clicked for Garrett, because in the last 5 games, he's had 60 targets, 40 receptions, 472 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And those 5 games across a 16-game or a 17-game full season pace, he would be on pace for 136 receptions, 1,605 yards, and 14 touchdowns, which is just crazy, crazy numbers. And the catch, of course, catches a lot of headlines because that was simply remarkable. Just absolutely amazing, amazing, insane catch that even today as a fan, you're trying to figure out like how he caught that football and stayed in bounds. Just wild, wild stuff. And the reason I'm giving a lot of credit to Garrett's not only the catch and what he's been able to do in this season, but look, some of the key guys on this team, whether it's Sauce, he's had some struggles. Breece had some struggles early on. He's been a little better recently, but still not quite putting up the numbers that I think most people would like to see. There's been some drops from Breece. He had the fumble last night where he ended up recovering it. The play after the Jets finally recovered a fumble on defense. So that right there was almost the same old Jets moment. Like we finally recover a fumble on defense. And then we go out and then Breece fumbled, ended up recovering it. But you're thinking to yourself, you got to be kidding me. Like Breece going to fumble. They're going to recover. And we finally recovered a fumble on defense. And we're going to hand it right back. But either way, Garrett's been out of all of them, like out of all the criticism, he's turned things around. And so has Quinnen. And so has Breece. The really only one left is that continues to be alarming because Breece started slow. Quinnen started slow. And Garrett started slow. But they've all 3 really started to turn the corner, especially Garrett. He's probably been the best of all of them because the numbers right now are just flying off the charts. And same thing, too, right now. If you watch him play, you can tell the connection's been very, very good, even last week in the loss between him and Rodgers. And with Devontae here, there's less attention, which opens him up a lot more. But you look at Sauce, he continues to be the main core, like one of the core members of this team that struggles. And that's got to be fixed. He's got to figure it out. And you have to start having a real conversation about Sauce here in the future, because if things don't take a drastic turn this year, no way you pay Sauce $30 million. You have to figure something out. So, but good to see these other guys turn things around. As for some other notes, Jalen Mills, I want to give a little bit of credit to. We talk about all these big guys, the defensive line, all that stuff, but some of that's probably going to fly under the radar. Jalen Mills, I'll give him some credit here. I'll give some time to Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills has been solid. He's been solid. He's been good. I may have came on here after the Pittsburgh loss and said it. I know I tweeted it out during the Steelers game that it was like the Jalen Mills legacy game, because early in that game against the Steelers, Jalen Mills was flying around. Was making a couple big plays, couple nice open field tackles, had a couple big hits, was just providing a big jolt of energy. And I'll say this, with all the injuries that the Jets have had in the secondary, Chuck Clark going down, obviously Tony Adams going down, Ashton Davis going down, they're down to Isaiah Oliver. Not that Ashton Davis is that good, but they're down to Isaiah Oliver and Jalen Mills, a guy that was not on this team to start the season that they picked up halfway through. And 4 games has been very solid. And last night was very, very good. Sure, there's been some sprinkles of missed tackles in there, and there's definitely been some mistakes, no doubt. But he's played with a lot of energy, and he's playing with a lot of effort. And there's been a lot of times over the last couple weeks, during that losing streak before the second half last night where players on defense looked like they lacked energy, looked like they were kind of just going through the motions. And Jalen Mills has never really been one of those guys through 4 games, right? He's always been flying around, has some good speed, brings the energy, brings some physicality. He's been a positive piece. And you look at last night was his best game as a Jet. 10 total tackles, had 1 run stop, 2 passes defended, and a 76.7 PFF grade, which was among the highest Jet PFF grades last night. And you look at his 5 games, we look at his season so far here with the Jets, 4 games, 22 total tackles, 5 passes defended, and he's got 1 tackle for loss. So he's been solid. I think the Pittsburgh game was good. Early on was good. I thought last night was very good. There's been times in this defense where missed tackling's been an issue. Looks like guys just going through the motion. They're getting pushed around, not bringing any physicality. That's been an alarming problem. Jalen Mills has never really had that issue so far, and you've got to give him some credit. He's been a guy that's come in here, depth piece, joined the team halfway through, and has provided much needed depth in that safety room, which is, of course, very, very banged up. And also tries and softens the blow of a guy like Sauce Gardner in the secondary who just can't tackle right now. Like, he's just terrible at tackling right now. So give some credit there to Jalen Mills. Just some other notes I want to get into. I thought Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses last night, watching back the film this morning, they were good. They held their own. Morgan Moses has been really pretty solid all year. Tyron Smith's been the main problem. But he held his own against Will Anderson. I know Will Anderson was banged up, but if you would have told me that neither of those guys really would have gone near Rodgers all night, I would have probably not believed you, but they did. Really good job by those 2 guys. Of course, Olu holding his own at right guard, first time playing, which was kind of crazy. But hey, it's, it is what it is. I guess the NFL. Welcome to the NFL. That was like his welcome to the NFL moment. That was his like welcome to the Jets moment. He comes here to play left tackle, and through the regular season, right so far, he has yet to play right tackle. He has yet to play left tackle. Instead, he's played right tackle and right guard. So it's like, what the, it's just crazy. It's like he came here to play left tackle, and now he's playing 2 positions that he's really has no experience. But thought him and Max Mitchell, for the most part, held their own for being thrown into the fire. So we'll see how that pans out here. Hopefully the line gets a little bit more healthier here with this 10-day break. Mini bye. And like I said, this kind of feels like for some a little bit of a delusion win, right? You can kind of, as a Jet fan, some Jet fans out there, I'll continue to say it. Get back to 5-6, get the 6-6, and I'll start to believe again. Then we could start talking playoffs. But for the fans out there that want to believe already, want to buy in now at 3-6 again, you got Arizona coming up next week, 10 days to prepare. It's a winnable game. And you've got the Colts before the bye. You have to win those 2 games, no doubt. You can get the 5-6 at the bye week. You can start to get a little bit more realistic, like optimism, if you get to 5-6, that they can maybe go on a run. But we'll see. Starts with Arizona. And that's been my whole thing. I haven't done it really at all today. Usually, like in past years when the Jets sometimes have won or, have won 2 straight or whatever, you start to look at the schedule and all this stuff and say, oh, you find a way here. Like, just where this team's at, there's still a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. They should have had 7 more points last night. The penalties still, right? 2 major special teams penalties last night. Those can't happen. There still are some questions about the coaching. There's still a lot to clean up. There's still a lot to fix. So for me, it's just taking it game by game. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this team's going to the playoffs. Oh, this team's going to go 6-2. I'm just not going to do it because I still need to see this team do it consistently. All right, you won this week. 10 days to prepare for Arizona. Win next week. Then you're 4-6. And just take it week by week. Just find a way to stack wins. Not going to just look at the whole big picture. Just win next week against Arizona and keep moving from there. That's kind of my mindset with where this team's at. So, but like I said, it's nice to enjoy a win. As much as, It's painful. It's painful doing recap pods after losses. It's all that. It's just so painful. Nobody wants to watch losing football. Nobody wants to watch this team fall to like 2-9 before the bye. Like I said, I hope that this team proves me wrong. I really do. I hope that this is the start of 4 straight wins for this team. I really do. More than that, like, right? We all hope this team goes on some magical run, but they've still got a lot more to work on, still a lot to prove, and we all know that. But pick up a W, Victory Friday, enjoy it. Get a nice stress-free weekend ahead of us, and then Arizona coming up after that with 10 days to prepare and try and bag another win next Sunday. So that'll do it. We'll have a lot more content coming your way here into next week. Obviously, deadline coming up on Tuesday. Don't think the Jets will probably do much. If they would have lost last night, I think you probably could have seen some pieces being sold. But from a Jets addition standpoint, I don't really see much happening. They've already kind of, right, Reddick, they brought him back, or they brought him in, holdout ended. So that was kind of like an acquisition for them, even though he's been on the team even though, of course, he was just holding out. And then, of course, they trade for Devontae. So I don't really see much from a Jets perspective, but you never know. We'll see what the Jets do on Tuesday, any other moves that may affect them, all that stuff. So we'll have a lot more content next week out as well, normal shows as well, just news, all that good stuff. So stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. Enjoy the rest of your Victory Friday. And as always, through the highs, through the lows, all that good stuff, always. JETS, 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 Jets. See you guys soon. Thank you so much for tuning in.